Reading from Genesis, the story of Joseph. When Joseph has finally revealed to his brothers who he is after being in exile from the family. Starting at the 45th chapter, the 3rd through the 11th verses. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer, and he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you the remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made a father to Pharaoh and the Lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. And I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty." And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. And then in Luke chapter 6, continuing the Sermon on the Plains, where Jesus is preaching practical messages to his followers, many of whom we learned last week were poor and hungry and mourning and excluded and reviled. And today in chapter 6 of Luke, starting at the 27th verse, he says this: "But I say to you who are listening, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, and bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who asks of you. And if anyone takes away what is yours, do not ask for it back again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good for you, what credit is that for you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you expect to receive payment, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. Instead, love your enemies. Do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. For he himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Love your enemies, he says. So first of all, to talk about that, I want to talk about enemies. Do you have enemies? Do you have people that are so rotten to you that you can call them enemies? People who lie awake at night just plotting your demise? Do you have enemies? Do you have enemies? People who you lay awake at night plotting their demise? See, as I think about this, I think, I don't know that I really have enemies. Now, one of the things about being a pastor in the position that I'm in here is there are lots and lots of people in this community who know me. I don't know anybody, but they know me. Are they enemies? I don't know. Depends on what they think they know about me. I was sitting in this church A few days ago, after the YWCA board meeting, and Erica Storch was sitting here, and she was sitting with Karen Stakem, whose sister is the mayor of Charleston. And they were talking about people who, in their life of politics, have said and done some really crazy kinds of things to them. Like when the COVID pandemic was happening, there were people who wished Erica death from COVID. Now, I would say that's an enemy. And there were like 3 or 4 things that this person wished that she would get so that she would die. This is the kind of thing that our politicians go through. And you know, as politicians go, this is not really a political statement, but as politicians go, she tended to be pretty reasonable. But she still got death threats. Karen said her sister doesn't even pay any attention to any social media, anything that comes, because it can be so ugly. Those people probably you could call enemies. I happen to know that Craig Barnes, who used to be the pastor of, he just retired as the president of Princeton Seminary, but before that he was the pastor of National Capital Presbyterian Church, church that Ronald Reagan went to. And he did not read Monday's emails. He came in on Monday and he received large amounts of emails, people complaining or arguing with him or calling him names from the sermon he had preached the day before. And so he would just erase all his emails. So he didn't have to hear any of that. That way people who were negative and maybe even could be called enemies were not allowed to sit with him and fester in him and become enemies for him. Now here, you know, we have this odd thing that Jesus is saying. Remember that the people that he is talking to, because this is a sermon on the plain, not Matthew's Sermon on the Mount. This is a sermon on the plain where Jesus has come down from the mountain to the plain to stand face to face, shoulder to shoulder with the people whom we know from last week's text are poor, hungry, reviled, and in need. Jesus is talking to people who are living under Roman oppression. They know what enemies are because they live with them day to day. And yet Jesus doesn't say, go get them. Crush your enemies. Treat them worse than they treat you. Rise up against them and become a godly nation. No, Jesus says, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. It's completely counterintuitive. Where's Gigi? Gigi downstairs? You look at Gigi and you see this cute little kid, and she hugs you and she loves you. And you go, oh, I love her too. Isn't that easy to do? Right? Elizabeth, you missed terribly. You loved her. She loved you. Easy to do. Some of you probably have really good neighbors. I have new neighbors I haven't met yet. I've rung the doorbell 3 different times and they haven't answered. I'm trying not to take that personally. Neighbors who are good to you and come and get your mail or mow your grass or shovel your walk. Easy to love them back. Bake them a pie or share a cup of sugar with them or whatever neighbors do, I don't know. Jesus knows that. He says that. After he says, love your neighbors, he says, it's easy for you to love people who love you. It's hard to love your neighbors, love your enemies. These people know that they're supposed to love their neighbors. That's not new thought. Jesus says that all the time. But the Jews have been saying that and knowing that at this point for about 4,000 years. And the question is equally as valid, who are your neighbors as who are your enemies? Neighbors are commonly thought to be anyone who's around you that you need to embrace. But now we're hearing enemies are people who we need to embrace. It's just harder to do. Much, much harder to do. We live in a world now where we can be confused about who is a neighbor and who is an enemy. They're starting to look the same to us. I'm going to suggest to you today that it doesn't matter. Because according to Jesus and our text today, we are to love our enemies. We are to love our neighbors as ourselves. We are to do to others as we would want others to do to us. That is the Christian imperative that Jesus is announcing today. Love one another as God has loved us. Amen.